Hello, dear friends, and welcome to the Mission Evolution Radio Show, sharing thoughts with the leading experts to uncover expansive and evolutionary truths that support the unity and enlightenment. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka, and this hour we'll be exploring the boundless self. Identity is a mysterious thing. We can only be what we identify with, and yet, in the process of identification, we become trapped in the identity. We live, breathe, and express through the limited bandwidth of frequency that by our own attunement defines us. We're expansive beings of light, capable of multiple expressions in any moment, designed to shift like quicksilver. Yet our wings have been clipped. We've been conditioned to take on a role and stick with it for fear of losing ourselves, our importance in the scheme of things, and our relationship to others. What is this boundless self? Where do we truly begin and end? Can we transcend identity and still function in society? If we let go of these self-imposed limitations, what wonders are we capable of? Could we actually evolve into more than we currently are? Our guest this hour has some amazing original thoughts on this very subject. Robert Levine is a professor of psychology and former associate dean of the College of Science and Mathematics at California State University, Fresno, where he's won awards for both his teaching and research. He's former president of the Western Psychological Association. His books include A Geography in Time, The Power of Persuasion, How We're Bought and Sold, and the just-released new edition of Stranger in the Mirror, The Scientific Search for Self. His website, boblevine.net. Bob, thanks for joining us on Mission Evolution Radio Show.
Well, thank you, Gwilda. Thanks for having me.
So what is the self?
You decided to start with it.
Yeah, let's just jump in with both feet.
Right. That's something that I've tried to wrestle with, of course, my entire life, as everybody does, but for probably the last 10 years. And I found that it's a classic example of the more one looks for answers, the more difficult questions it raises. What I can tell you is that what I've tried to do is to beginning as a social psychologist and looking at what sort of person do I identify as. If I ask myself, who am I? Try to list answers to that question. We find that people are not only complex but often full of contradictions. But then what I decided to do was to look at other sciences. And what we find is that if we look on the biological level, if we look on the genetic level, even if we look at on the level of physics, that there are great confusions. It's very difficult to establish where self begins, and other ends.
Yeah, that's pretty fascinating, isn't it? Because we have, like you were saying, on the biological level, we're a community of flora and fauna and bugs and this and that. I mean, I think there are 10 times more bugs than there are human cells in the physical body, and that's just on the physical level.
Absolutely, it's a tough one to get your head around. But there are some estimates that more than half of our body weight is composed of microorganisms that have a different DNA than we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how within all that, we're kind of viewing ourselves as a single being, and yet we're really not. How do we reconcile that?
Well, I'd like to add that on the biological level, even if we look at the self that we are now, and the self that we believe that we were somewhere in the past, that with just a couple of very small exceptions, we do not possess a single cell today that we had when we were children. Mm-hmm. So we're very changeable. We're very changeable beings, and we live on some sort of a faith that this person that we see the pictures of when we were younger and they're a part of our memory or ourselves. And then we also project to the future, and we think about a future self, which we take possession of, which is really a pretty weird thing when you think about it, something that doesn't exist that we're planning. we're planning, we're sacrificing for something that doesn't exist. But the question of how do we reconcile it? We tell a story. We develop a narrative. We develop some sort of sensibility to help us get through, or else it just all becomes too confusing. So we pick and choose items from our memories of the past. We filter, we modify, we reinterpret things that happen in the present to try to form some sort of narrative about who we are and who we're not, and what differentiates ourselves from other people.
So do these narratives or stories actually dictate what we become?
They very much do. Something else that we certainly know from my field of social psychology is that once a person takes a position, once a person establishes a belief, that it's human nature to do everything we can to maintain that belief, and in fact to convince ourselves that we're correct. And this means that we're very careful about the information that we allow to come in. We put ourselves in positions where we're around other people or in social media groups that confirm our position. And at the end, what may have been kind of an arbitrary stab in the dark to try to make sense of something, we become more convinced of than ever.
With everything changing so rapidly and societies blending together and the speed of media and everything else, isn't that putting a lot of pressure on that old way of being, that old identity?
It is putting a great deal of pressure on it, but I would argue that there are paradoxical consequences. The more confusing things become, the more we strive to simplify in one way or another to make sense of it, and once again to convince ourselves that we're right. And this world that we live in, where the information is coming at us as often as we choose to take a look at whatever that device is that we happen have in front of us at this moment. It pushes us up to simplify, to have an even clearer narrative, and then once we have that narrative, to surround ourselves with inputs that are going to be consistent with that narrative. And
that sounds almost more like devolution than evolution.
I'm sorry, I didn't can you repeat that again?
Yeah, it sounds like we're shutting down more rather than evolving and becoming more expansive by that description.
I think that's the case, and without wanting to take tangents into today's political world, I think that's exactly what we're seeing there.
So, how can we transcend that tendency and become more expansive and embrace more of reality?
Well, I believe the beginning is to engage in narratives such as the narrative that you're doing in your show, of getting people to try to recognize what is actually going on, to step outside of the situation. I actually study cults, and cults are really, they're a wonderful example. They're a primary example of how all this is happening in an exponential way. And what we find with cults is that once somebody takes that first step, they then tend to become more and more engaged until, as we well know, they end up in a spot where they're true believers, and it's us versus them. And the only way to break through is to be able to pull that person out of that context, to have them be able to look from the outside. And I believe that that's the best thing that we can do ourselves is, if you're a CNBC fan, that turn it off for a while, go and take a walk, go talk to somebody who has another point of view. If if you're a Fox News person, then do the same. And once we have that once we pull ourselves out of it, we start to see just how we're pushing ourselves down these paths.
Well, it's time for us to take a quick break. It's time for a short pause. Robert and I will be back after this commercial break. You're listening to the Mission Evolution Radio Show, coming to you through the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
You have heard of the X-Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com.
Welcome back. This is Mission Evolution Radio, dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. Remember, past episodes are available on our website, missionevolution.org. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Professor Robert Levine. His website, boblevine.net. Robert, we were talking about cults, and would you mind defining a cult for us?
Also, one of those difficult questions. It's been said that every new religious, every successful religious movement, every mainstream religious movement was originally called a cult, and one person's cult is another person's step toward the future. But what we can talk about is cult-like thinking, And cult-like thinking has very little peripheral vision. It is one where one has their beliefs. Your beliefs are assumed to be fundamentally true, and any challenges to those beliefs are the sign of somebody of lower moral stature or of pure and true evil.
So it's kind of like agreed upon reality?
It is an agreed upon reality. That's very well put, and it's not. But I think agreed upon may be too soft a word. It's once that agreement is made, it becomes seen as the truth with a capital T.
Mm-hmm. So what effect does that have on the individual then?
The individual will find ways to filter any new information that comes in a way that enhances that belief. If contradictory information comes in, that becomes reinterpreted as in such a way that it proves my point.
So we reevaluate or redefine input. We twist the input to match with the belief system. Is that what's going on?
Yes, absolutely. You can think of that in a number of ways. To go back to, what we have going on the political level today is just, it's an awful situation, but it's a living laboratory for social psychologists like myself. So a new piece of information comes in challenging. If I could assume to look through the eyes of somebody who is a supporter of the current administration, something comes in that challenges the current administration. That now becomes interpreted as part of that narrative, which has been established, that the press is out to get this person, and I become even more strongly convinced of my feelings in the first place. But
so how can we as individuals transcend this conditioning? Because it sounds like it's supporting separatism rather than unity.
Absolutely. As I say, one way is to step out of the situation. You have to cut the line. You have to, for a moment, take some sort of a sabbatical from the lifelines, from the social lifelines, from the psychological lifelines that you have. Get out of the situation and try to see it as a stranger. But I think in a more practical way, it's important to introspect, take note of yourself. One way of doing this is what we call activity sampling in my field. Basically keep some sort of a journal. What am I doing right now? What am I thinking? How does it make me feel? And try to think for yourself. Think for yourself in the most literal sense. Take note of what this does for me, and take note of the person that I am in that situation. And I think once you begin to do that, you're able to look at yourself as if you were another person, as if you were a counselor to yourself, and see that, well, you know what? There were these contradictions in myself. I don't like that contradiction. Or I do like that contradiction. I like that in this situation I act one way, and in the second situation, appropriately, I act. The main thing is, though, once we have this understanding of ourselves, and we have these insights, that we can make these decisions. And if you'll excuse the terminology, we can rise above ourselves.
So what you're talking about is developing a witness for yourself rather than letting the cult mentality be your witness.
Yes, the cult mentality, and and I think people aren't necessarily comfortable with that notion of cult. It's very normal. It's a very normal mentality. I mean, we look for these lifelines. We need to find ways of finding some kind of a social group, a social community, a social reality. that can help us make sense of things. But to be able to look at it from a distance in such a way that we can understand that, this is arbitrary. This isn't to say that it's good or bad. We need this kind of arbitrary narratives, but just understanding that it's arbitrary opens up all kind of possibilities. Now you're in control. Now you can mold your future self. You can mold the sort of person you would like to be, and you can mold the sort of community you'd like to be in.
It sounds like we've become extremely compartmentalized, and what we need is more continuity. How can we, if we're molding our societies, not our societies, but our groups, our support groups, this and that, how does that serve? How can we become more flexible so that we're also embracing continuity?
Well, there are a number of ways of looking at what we're, of what we think of as continuity. One is that we're not contradicting ourselves back and forth. That we're not shifting from one reality to another reality in such a way that we're causing difficulties. That we're making the world and ourselves a worse place rather than a better place. The other way of looking at it is that we need to keep an open mind and to understand that maybe this way that I was acting, this self that I was in this situation, is not the way that I would like to act. There's a wonderful saying that I love. It's been attributed to various sorts of philosophers, and that is that it's good to keep an open mind, but not so open that your brains fall out.
Boy, isn't that the truth? Because I think right now what we're really challenged with is there is so much information. There are so many viewpoints. How do we maintain integrity within the self and embrace all the different viewpoints? Yeah,
and once again, I would argue that the way to do that is to begin by becoming more and more aware that this is what we're doing, and that we're living a very arbitrary truth, that this truth changes over time. It's often in the form of sometimes a combative committee, even within our own minds, and that there are ways and to identify the elements that we don't think are working correctly, but it takes a certain detachment from what we think of as ourself in order to do that.
Okay,
so if you can live, if you can do it like a Nike commercial, just do it, mind over matter, self-discipline, I can, then that's great. But if that's not working for you, if you watch things getting worse, if you watch yourself getting entrenched, you watch your community getting entrenched in behaviors that we are uncomfortable with, then I suggest that we recognize another reality of what it is to have a self. That, there's this self of awareness, but what's going on inside our mind has much more to do with has to do with much more than we're aware of. This part of this idea that I can decide to do something. Maybe it is somewhat self-deceptive. It is largely self-deceptive, and at that point, it's useful to just sit back and look at yourself as another person. How do I want to mold myself? And we don't have the ultimate control in that. We know from studies that that we only become aware of our decisions after there's been neural activity. In other words, the decisions seem to be made on a neural level in our brain before we're aware of these decisions. And we need to find ways that we're not enslaved by this kind of a relationship. And we know that well, I may not be able to precede my neural activity, but I can serve an editorial function. I can look at the person that I am and the person I'd like to be, and I can influence myself to.
Well, we're going to have to take another break, but on the other side, we'll take a look at how we can transcend our conditioning, or can we? And it is time for another short pause. Robert and I will return to our discussion on the other side of this break, so you stay right there. This is Mission Evolution Radio Show on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
From our broadcast studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, to the world and beyond, you're watching the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
AVS Media Den.
The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school, training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com.
Welcome back. This is the Mission Evolution Radio Show, www.missionevolution.org, bringing the latest tools and information to support the path to enlightenment. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Professor Robert Levine. His website, boblevine.net. Robert, we were talking about these neurological pathways that tend to dictate our behavior. So how do we get beyond our conditioning so that we can dictate our own behavior?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, isn't it? How do we rise above ourselves? And I, as I said, I believe that for most of us, if we've been unsuccessful in rising above ourselves, uh, whatever it may be, that it's helpful to look at ourselves as a bit of an object. Look at ourselves as a stranger, or look at ourselves even better as a friend. You're watching your friend struggle with something, whatever. So how can I, how am I gonna help them out? How can I create conditions that are going to help them out? And sometimes it can get a little bit silly. Uh, there's a wonderful example. A woman who tells this story herself. She was a strong civil rights advocate, a progressive human rights advocate, and she was also a longtime smoker who'd been trying to quit her habit for quite some time. And there was a point when I guess she saw a doctor, and he gave her essentially a death sentence. She knew she had to do something about it, and she just didn't trust herself to be able to quit. So she went to a friend. She wrote out a check to the Ku Klux Klan for $10,000 and told her friend that if I ever smoke another cigarette, you are to send this check to the Ku Klux Klan. And
That's a motivator.
she never smoked another cigarette. Um, there are writers. They're just terrific because they can be so neurotic about their free creativity. So Victor Hugo, the great French writer, was said to he liked to write in the morning, and what he would do, he would take off his clothes and give it to his butler, and tell his butler that the butler is not to give him his clothes back until he had written so many thousand words that morning. These are extreme examples, but I think they're a good way of looking at things. Find your own weak point. Try to identify the type of situations that bring out the best in you, and the situations that prevent you from expressing the worst inside of you, and then try to create situations that are going to maximize your successes. And
So
this is a very personal. This is truly personal. People can talk to you about the process, but if somebody tells you they have the answer, then I would say, thank you. It's been good talking to you, but I need to look at myself very carefully.
So how does a sense of self differ from identity and personality?
Aha. The sense of ourself is the narrative that we draw about ourselves. So, if I ask myself, if I ask the question, I ask the question, who am I? What are the sort of answers that I give? This is my self-identity. The personality is the corpus and the mind that I show to the world, and there may or may not be consistency between the two, and there certainly may or may not be consistency between the way that I believe I present myself to the world and the way the world believes that I appear.
So do you see this conflict between sense of self, identity, and personality? Do you see that as something that we can transcend as we become more unified?
I guess that question of unification is a difficult one for me. We certainly want to believe that the subcells that we have, who am I when I'm speaking on mission evolution? Who am I when I'm home and speaking to my wife? Who am I when I'm speaking to a waitress? These are very different people. I don't see a need to unify them in the sense of they're becoming precisely the same person. But what I do want, what I would like, at least when I think about myself, is to be able to take these people and sit them around a table and be convinced that they have something to say to each other, and that they essentially get along with each other.
When I'm working with a bunch of people, different people, I find that there's different aspects of me that connect better than others to different individuals. It doesn't mean I lose vision of the whole. It's like a diamond showing a different facet, but there's still unity there. How can we become more that way so that we do identify with the whole rather than the little parts?
I have difficulty. I have difficulty with this idea of there is a whole, but that whole is a moving target. We know this when we step into a pressure-packed situation, when we assume a new role. You become. It's your first day on the job. Or even more so when you become a parent, or the first time that you fall in love with somebody, a whole new self comes out. An entire new self comes out. The whole changes at that point. But it's one new part of yourself, and it's part of this ever-changing self. I believe that, to me, rather than thinking about what is the whole, what is it that ties everything together, what I prefer to think about is this corpus, is this mind moving in the right direction? Are the conflicts that exist in between, are they useful? Are they useful conflicts, or are they problematic conflicts? The closest to a whole that I can think of is this sense of awareness that I have, and I think of that as kind of an editor's function. That I'm not the writer of the script or the various scripts, but what I can do, I think, is to make suggestions or put pressures on myself to improve that subscript. To look for an entire new script, and where I see disconnections that are problematic, to see if I could do something about that. But I think it's important to recognize that from the level of ourselves to the level of our social behaviors, that it's all change, that we are constantly evolving. There is no thing there. There is no self as a discrete, tangible entity that exists.
That's a beautiful point, that, what they say, the one constant thing is change. But if we're not changing, then we're stagnant. And there's only two ways you go with this. Either stop moving, and that doesn't work well. If we freeze, it's death. Or you continue to expand. How can we reconcile that expansion with our sense of self?
Well, I believe that the expansion is ourself. And once we embrace that as our true self, as this individual that's in constant change, this individual that has set very arbitrary boundaries between where their existence ends and other people begin, then we have a more realistic view of who we are as a person, and that opens up possibilities. One could certainly, you can ask the question, a very realistic reaction to the notion that no single self exists is, well, what are you telling me? Should I just pack up and go to the beach? But I see it very differently. I see that as a source of enormous power. We can create ourselves. We can create ourselves, and we can recreate ourselves. And this isn't to say that I'm denying any consistency in myself. I'm not talking about this in any kind of a psychopathic kind of a way, but I can recreate myself to become a better self.
So you recreate yourself by recreating your stories?
By recreating our stories, but also by stepping back and looking at our stories and seeing and looking at the ways that our stories may be limiting our possibilities for enhancing ourselves, for creating better future selves. And once we do that, we can make decisions to put ourselves in different situations, associate with more or less with different people, take on certain challenges, stop doing things that are not helping us along, begin doing other sorts of things.
Well, it's about time for another break. We'll take the commercial break. Robert and I will be back shortly, so don't you dare go away. We're listening to the Mission Evolution Radio Show on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
You have heard of the X-Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
The new nonfiction book, Razor of Madness, is similar to cult movies like Clockwork Orange, Dragon's Tattoo, or The Other Side of Hell. Wayne Morin Jr. and Thomas Lee Howe will expose widespread and systematic deficiencies in this thought-provoking tell-all novel. Mind control rages among scholars in law schools. Human rights are ignored while thought reform and mental manipulation are accepted practices used as behavior modification. Dr. Louis Jolyon West comes to mind. Media and public scrutiny shows that United States mental hospitals are in fact destructive murder industries. Razor of Madness expose novel details this epidemic through an in-depth professional and personal investigation. For decades, there has been a revolving door policy that still releases killers and pedophiles back into society. The maestro of mind control continues to haunt America to this very day. Razor of Madness is available in paperback or as a downloadable ebook at Amazon.com.
I'm William S. Peckham. If you enjoy a good mystery with a touch of the paranormal, then you'll love my novel, From Out of the Woodwork. It's the story of a young Toronto contractor, Sean Kennedy, who buys derelict homes, guts them, and turns them into multifamily dwellings. Slums just waiting to happen. When Sean buys 29 Livery Lane, the house fights back. Former owners unexpectedly come out of the woodwork as he starts the destruction. The apparitions come to him when he touches old books, reads hidden letters, rummages through old boxes, finds a locket, or reads a discovered manuscript of a murder mystery. From Out of the Woodwork will take you from 1899 to the horror of the World Trade Center, September 11, 2001. Check out From Out of the Woodwork on my website, www.williamspeckham.com.
Welcome back. This is the Mission Evolution Radio Show, www.missionevolution.org, bringing the latest developments in an evolving world. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. I always love suggestions from my listeners. Email me at info@missionevolution.org to propose a topic or guest that's on your mind. I'm sure we'll all enjoy them. We're speaking with Professor Robert Levine, his website, boblevine.net. So I need you to help me out here a little bit, Robert. I need a nice layaway for a person to start stepping out of their conditioning and into the driver's seat of their lives.
Okay, here's here's a beginning, a low tech way of doing this, or it could become a high tech way because you can find a lot of apps on the internet. But begin to keep some sort of a journal, a personal journal.
Now, does the personal journal work because you can't rewrite it once you've written it, so you can't rewrite history?
Oh, I would no. I would say very differently. I would say that what's nice about a personal journal is that we can then begin to look at it as an editor and see, well, you know what? I think I left something out, or I think there's another way of looking at this. But I'll give you another way of going at it, and it may be helpful to find one of them, the many apps that are available. What we talk of.
Well, just say, do you mind going back to the personal journal because I'm still unclear on how you use it. What do you do with it?
Okay, so if in that personal journal, if I can keep track in some sort of real time, or as close to real time as possible, of what was I doing, what was I thinking, what did I take away from this? How did I walk away from this? So and then if I can do these kinds of recordings on some kind of a consistent basis, and then be able to look back on it. What I would suggest is that what I would argue is everybody that I know who has done this finds that there are many things that they see that really surprise them. So, it seemed like when I always seem to walk away in a better mood, or I seem to feel energized when I did such and such trivial thing. And, and to just look at something like that, and then it stares you in the face. Why don't I do this trivial thing more often? Or there was something that I always felt that I had to do. Every time I did it, it led to something wrong. And then to be able to look at that and say, well, do I need to do that? Quite often the answer that comes back is no. And that means that I chose to do that. And that gives me, that lends me some control over making some sort of change. But it's a way of being able to, as you're living that narrative, you're living through that narrative, and then to be able to look back on this narrative as if you're another person. I know I keep saying that, but I think that's the best way of doing that.
It helps you. It helps you become more mindful.
It helps us become more mindful. It does.
Okay.
It helps us become more mindful, and by becoming more mindful, it shows us possibilities.
Gotcha. So we can change behaviors based on witnessing them in the first place.
Yeah. If you think about another person, think about somebody you're very close to, somebody who you have a great deal of empathy for, and you have a great deal of compassion for, and you can look at their lives, you can see their lives, and it becomes, I think we're pretty clear about, gee, I wish you could stop doing that. To be able to treat yourself in the same way, to get that same sort of clarity about yourself.
Well, you demonstrate that the brain is subject to illusion. What do you mean by that? Because we're having to use our brain to do this journaling and make these decisions.
Well, the brain is selecting, interpreting, and perceiving in ways that don't necessarily correspond to what's out there. I mean, from the sensory level to the psychological level, our brains, I'm sorry to say, but our brains just aren't strong enough to take everything in, and as a means of survival, we select, we filter, we interpret, we put things into some sort of a hole. That hole on the psychological level is that narrative of the person that we are, and the narrative about the worlds that exist around us. but this narrative is it's a way of looking at things. It's an illusion, not in the sense that it's false, but in the sense that it's incomplete.
Partial information.
Yes.
But we're creating this identity in order to have a place to work in the world. How can we transcend our need for identity so that we have more flexibility?
I think the best way to do that is to begin to face up to who we are. Think about ourselves. Try to identify those subselves. Try to identify the kind of person we are in different roles. Think about the voices in your head. And I don't want to pull us off of the planet Earth here, but there's that constant narrative, that narrative flow that we have. Anybody who's done, you don't have to do meditation. You just have to go for a walk, and you quietly have these thoughts that are making you happy, making you anxious. And sometimes, of course, we speak those thoughts out loud, which is another curious phenomenon. But to understand that this is part of us, that we're listening to ourselves, we're listening to these neural connections. Often these are voices that have been there for that are the voices of other people, people who are powerful others in our lives, and to listen to those voices, but not to become enslaved by those voices.
Well, isn't that the first step out of it? Is by hearing what's running you?
What's running through your head, and to look at it with a critical eye. What was it? David Foster Wallace talked about our factory defaults. When you get up in the morning and whatever's there, whatever is playing out, it may be helpful. It may be that our minds are trying to tell us something, and they are trying to tell us something. But that doesn't mean we have to listen to everything that our minds are telling us. But this requires stepping back from ourselves, and requires an effortful way of thinking about ourselves in a way that doesn't necessarily come naturally.
How do we relate to others, though, without having the identity to do so?
Well, we do have an identity, and I would suggest to most people that this kind of fear that when we start to think this way, that we're just going to turn into little insane asylum. That's not the way it is. That these are private moments, and once we get out in the world, that wholeness comes back. But we can prepare ourselves. That for what kind of wholeness we want to present to the world. So it can be that very simply, okay, every time I see this person, we end up getting in a fight. And how does that fight begin? Well, there's something about she does something that makes me feel this way. Well, let's look at it a little more carefully. What did you bring to that situation? How did you feel before you went there? Do you do this with other people? And then we can hopefully become better script writers for ourselves. Maybe we can alter that script that we bring to these situations, and as we know, can change everything.
What do you see for the future of self as we evolve as human beings?
Well, one thing that I see very clearly is the notion of an extended self is becoming more and more extended. We talk about these boundaries of ourselves, where we think of it ending where our body ends, but it's always been something very much more than that. if I ask you for your name and your address, I write it down on a piece of paper.
I'm sorry, but believe it or not, only too soon we're out of time. Robert, thanks very much for coming on the show.
You're welcome. Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Our guest this hour has been Professor Robert Levine, the author of many books, including Stranger in the Mirror, The Scientific Search for Self. His website is boblevine.net. Remember to join our email family to stay abreast of all our exciting new things we have coming up at missionevolution.org. This has been the Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwilda Wiyaka on the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Join us next time as the mission continues to bring resources and support in an evolving world.
Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com. Are you or is someone you know struggling with addictions, depression, anxiety, relationships, low self-esteem, lack of confidence, grief, success, and prosperity? Do you know that your subconscious belief plays a big role in the outcome of your hard work? We can help you permanently change the beliefs that may be the reason for your struggles and failures. We care about getting you the return on your investment and the results you are looking for. We can help you be free of the limitations of your past and in realizing your highest potential. We work with people by phone and Skype. For more information, visit us at www.ritasoman.com. That's www.ritasoman.com. Do you think you have energy problems in your home? Do you feel better when you're away than when you're home? Joey Korn is a global leader in the world of dowsing who specializes in personal energy clearing and space clearing. He can help you create an ideal energy environment in your home no matter where you live in the world. Learn about his remote spiritual house cleaning services and much more at www.dowsers.com. You can get Joey's book, Dowsing, A Path to Enlightenment, as well as other dowsing books and tools, Kabbalah books, and Walter Russell books. Joey's work is really amazing. Go to dowsers.com right now. That's DOWSERS.com or call 1-877-DOWSING. That's 1-877-369-7464.